Okay, we're recording.
Excellent. Okay, so we're talking about the mineral soul. In paragraphs 2, 3, and 4 of this 9th symbolic meaning, Abdu'l-Baha describes the mineral, vegetative, and animal souls. So let's look at them in sequence. So what are we at? 14. Carolyn, how about you for number 14?
Carolyn's just left her place.
Okay, let me just, how about Heather?
As for the mineral soul, it consists of intrinsic matter in the form of minerals, and this is its perfection, its purity, and the effects that appear from it. And so observe the precious stones that are mine, how they are heated within the bowels of the earth until they reach their perfection and beauty through the appearance of this soul within them and the emergence of their essential qualities through this process. Abdu'l-Baha commentary.
So here he's incorporating Islamic views of science. These were medieval views that also were shared by Christians for many centuries about how you came to have a precious stone created by the pressures of being underground for so many centuries. As you know, Abdu'l-Baha discussed these same souls in various chapters of Some Answered Questions. There he highlights some of the universal principles of nature. The first concerns the gradual development of all created beings. So is Carolyn back now, or?
Yes.
Okay, Carolyn, let's take it away with number 15.
Okay. The growth and development of all beings proceeds by gradual decrees. This is the universal and divinely ordained law and the natural order. The seed does not suddenly become the tree. The embryo does not at once become the man. The mineral substance does not in a moment become the stone. No, all these grow and develop gradually until they attain the limit of perfection.
Okay. So does anyone have any insight into his comment that minerals only gradually become stones? This statement right here. I would have thought that all minerals would automatically fall into this category.
Maybe he's speaking about metamorphism. In geology, the term metamorphism is the changes in the quality of the minerals. So that's what they call, and I think he's referring to this metamorphism.
Okay, that's a subject I don't know anything about.
Yeah, well, this is a geology thing. That's why I just connected with what is written here. Because, for example, certain fossils under such a strata of earth with temperature and heat, they change in quality. They transform into different material. And I think this is connected with that one. And that process is called metamorphism.
Well, then they're talking about the mineral substance versus the mineral itself. So the mineral substance does not in a moment become a stone. So it requires the pressure of the earth for the substance to actually form.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it, but I would say if you from what Joey and the Ramas said, that, you know, let's take granite, for example. You'd have to ask a geologist, is granite formed, you know, more or less instantaneously, or does it over geologic time and pressure become granite? If it is over geologic time, then that would explain what Abdu'l-Baha is saying here.
Well, you could certainly see that being true of shale, for instance, starting out as sand and then being compressed into actual rock over many years. Anyway,
Mark, just so you know, Carol has her hand up, and Margaret, and Belinda, and Alan. So lots of input here.
oh my God, this is
Starting with
okay.
Carol.
Carol first. Go ahead, Carol.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll let any one of the other ladies go first, and I'll go last.
Okay.
So
who
Margaret,
else?
Margaret was next, Mark.
Yes, please.
No, I'm thinking that things like gemstones and things are certainly developed within strata by heat and pressure. So diamonds will come out of carbon, but you've got to have very special conditions for them to form. And the same with a number of gemstones. And certainly, as you said, sedimentary rock is developed over eons in the oceans by the sediment of all sorts of things. And you get things like the shale developments in the Rocky Mountains. So, you know, there is a development of what our rocks and minerals and the strata and things are like, and how they develop over time. They talk about some of the stones in Newfoundland being billions of years old, like one of the oldest rocks on Earth.
Well, that's helpful. Thank you. Who else are we talking about?
Belinda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are muted. Oh, okay. I think he's also here establishing the basic idea of process, that everything comes into being through process, and that one thing develops from another through the processes. And the processes are quite varied. There's pressure and there's igneous rock, which is formed by heat and so on and so forth, as examples. So we could read this part statement as also Abdu'l-Baha describing, as he says there, nothing comes into being in an instant. It is all developed. It is created by a process or processes. And that is a principle that can be applied to plants, to animals, and to human beings, and to our spiritual development.
Excellent point. Okay, and who else?
Carol, and then Alan.
Okay.
Oh, Ellen can go before me.
You said ladies, Carol. Sorry.
True, true. But
Go ahead.
Last is for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking of artificial diamonds, which are essentially a lump of coal that is heated in an oven and becomes an artificial gemstone. But I was also thinking that, is this analogous to the development of an individual? You take some individual who's a bit of a hard nut and you put enough pressure on that hard nut over a long enough period of time, and maybe they become the best of souls, if you will. They reach a level of perfection as a result of the pressure that's applied to them in their lives.
It makes me think of the crucible that we're all in at the moment, with the extra pressures that we're being put under. Okay, Carol, there's nobody else. It's all up to you.
It's all up to us. I'm looking at Geology and indeed it says that when it comes to geochemical origins for granite, it has you looking at the magmas, and it has you looking at fractional crystallization where magnesium, titanium, calcium, sodium, and enrich the melt in potassium and silicon, and feldspar and quartz are two of the defining constituents of granite. So indeed, it gets polished through degrees of partial melting. And to me, because God is creator and universal, That's what he does to all his creatures. Like he has them go through fire, he has them go through heat, tests, suffering, all the rest. But in the polishing process, we become crystallized and become, hardened as granite. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay. So it gives a chance for your essence to become more visible, I guess is what you're saying. Okay. As a corollary, Abdu'l-Baha explains that everything we see around us is latent within nature and is only gradually unfolded. Sri Aurobindo and Ken Wilber both make the same point, but in slightly different language. As we'll see in the spring, Aurobindo refers to this as the involution of spirit. Mineral, vegetable, human, and a range of higher souls are all concealed within nature from time immemorial, according to him. The process of evolution of spirit is responsible for the appearance of these unexpected emergences. That's another subject that we'll get into in much greater detail in part 2. Okay, number 16 is next here. Alan Fuller, how about you?
16.
Yes, please.
The terrestrial globe was created from the beginning with all its elements, substances, minerals, parts, and components, but these appeared only gradually. First the minerals, then the plants, then the animals, and finally man. But from the beginning, these kinds and species were latent in the earthly realm and appeared gradually thereafter. For the supreme law of God and the universal natural order encompasses all things and subjects them to its rule. When you consider this universal order, you see that not a single thing reaches the limit of perfection immediately upon coming into existence, but grows and develops gradually until it reaches that stage. Abdu'l-Baha and some answered questions.
Okay, and that's back to Belinda's point about process being all important. So another principle which Abdu'l-Baha emphasizes is the inability of each kingdom to comprehend the kingdoms above it. Its progress, which may be considerable, is strictly limited to the boundaries of its own kingdom. Okay, let me see here. Belinda, how about you? Number 17.
Belinda, there we go.
There we are.
Okay.
Mark, I think you maybe I missed it. Did anybody read 15?
Oh, maybe we missed it.
No, we read that the tree does not, so the seed does not suddenly become the
okay.
tree.
Yep.
Okay, then I was confused. All right, I'll read 17. The differences of degree in the world of creation are a barrier to knowledge. For example, as this mineral belongs to the mineral kingdom, however far it may arise, it can never comprehend the power of growth. The plants and trees, however far they may progress, cannot imagine the powers of sight or of any of the other senses. Thus, differences of degree are a barrier to knowledge. The inferior degree cannot comprehend the superior. I'd like to comment here that some botanists would disagree with parts of this statement because it seems that plants do have the ability to respond to light. They don't see like an animal does at all, but they sense light and they sense the presence of other things. So, but I think the point he's making is more important there.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good clarification. And then number 18 is still on that same point. So maybe, let me see, David Erickson could read that.
Oops, I muted. Sorry, David, could you unmute?
Linda's a little fast on
I'm too
the,
fast on the trigger. I'm
muting.
sorry. I apologize.
That's all
This,
right.
this silver mineral can never gain sight or hearing. At most, it can progress in its own degree and become a perfect mineral. It cannot acquire the power of growth or sensation and can never become living. It can only progress in its own degree.
Okay. So now we'll move up the chain to the vegetative soul. So let's see who we've got here for it.
We all have, but he's putting it in.
Leslie, how about you? For number 19.
Okay. And as for the growing vegetable soul, it consists of an essence within which arises the vegetative power through which seeds, leaves, branches, and trees grow and develop in that it takes matter and elements and gives these to the trees and plants so that they grow and mature. They grow and extend their branches and give forth their fruits, their flowers, and their leaves. That's paragraph 3 in the commentary.
So in some answered questions, Abdu'l-Baha identifies the chief characteristic of the vegetative soul as the power of growth which is brought about in the seed through the influence of other created things. In keeping with the principles of the limitations imposed on each kingdom, he highlights those characteristics which are capable of transformation. Okay, let's see who else we've got here. Margaret, how about number 20?
20.
20, I guess it
Yeah.
is, yes.
The same holds true in the vegetable kingdom, where we observe that the original and distinctive character of the species does not change, while its form, color, and mass do change, transform, and evolve.
That's an interesting distinction. The original and distinctive character of the species does not change. And this is a point that he makes specifically having to do with human beings. When he looks back into primeval times and suggests that man did not come from the monkeys, that we were always separate in some characteristic. And I think we could use this term here. Its distinctive character of the species was always destined to become what we are so far now and what we will become later. Okay, so now we'll just progress on to the animal soul. Okay, let's see. Well, Margaret, would you mind just reading another one? They're short, so
Yeah.
I'm running out of people.
And as for the animal soul, it consists of an essence within which arises the powers of sensing those physical things that can be sensed. From commentary.
That comes back to the point that Belinda was just raising, having to do with the fact that the vegetable world does have the ability to sense, but it's raised to a new level in the animal kingdom. There are new capacities there that plants just don't have. This is quite close to his explanation in some answered questions. However, in that case, he connects this sensory power with the temporal nature of all compounded beings. Well, let me see, who else have we got left here? Durham, how about you? That's number 22.
The animal spirit is an all-embracing sensory power, which is realized through the composition and combination of the elements. When this composition disintegrates, that spirit likewise perishes and becomes non-existent.
Okay. So, as you may have noticed already, in some answered questions, Abdu'l-Baha frequently uses the term spirit in place of the word soul, used in his commentary on the Surah of Rum. It appears that he uses the two terms interchangeably when referring to levels of consciousness. So, as I've indicated in the summary of the stages of the soul's development chart, The next 9 stages in his list pertain to the human soul. The final stage, the divine soul, relates exclusively to the manifestations of God. Let's just take a look at that document. Let me see if I have it here. There it is. Okay, so I'll just make it a bit smaller so it fits. One more time. There, okay. So far we've just reviewed these first 3. And they all pertain to the realm of Nasut. And so there's a quick description of each here. So now we're going to focus on the human soul. And as Carolyn was mentioning, I've broken it down into all the different levels pertaining to human beings, and it goes all the way up to I. And then there's a 5th level, which is the divine soul, which is specific to the manifestations of God. So we're only going to be able to accomplish a little bit of this chart tonight. And then the majority of it's going to be focusing on, I think, I don't remember if we start on inspired soul or this one, but the rest of next time will be on this chart. So that's just to orient you. Okay. So now we'll look at the human soul, which occurs in Nasut. The human body is composed of the building blocks we've just talked about, the mineral, the vegetable, and the animal. Sorry, I'm a little bit overwhelmed with all the details. Okay, so let's see where we're at. I think we're ready to start our list over again. Okay, Nina, back to you for number 23.
The noblest of all earthly beings is man. In him are realized the animal, the vegetable, and the mineral kingdoms. That is, all these decrees are contained in him in such wise that he is endowed with them all. And being endowed with all these degrees and stations, he is informed of their mysteries and aware of the secrets of their existence. Abdul Baha, some answered questions.
I don't know if he means all of us are informed of the mysteries and aware of the secrets of their existence. I think this is sort of a general statement that brilliant people, brilliant scientists will dig into some of these areas and uncover those secrets for the rest of us to learn. But I'm not so sure how much each of us knows about these kingdoms. So we could say that humanity as a whole has the capacity through its scientific enterprises to become informed of these mysteries and secrets.
Mark, I think Heather had her hand up.
Oh, did she? Okay.
Did you, Heather? You have to unmute yourself, Heather.
I was just thinking about this. The noblest of all earthly beings is man. In him are realized the animal. Now that's easy to see. The vegetable, I guess that means thinking of the fact that we grow and develop, and we also sort of disintegrate as well as animals do. And the mineral soul would be about like trace elements like iron and potassium and things like that that are contained in the human body. Am I right about that or not?
Sounds good to me, but I'm not a scientist.
Okay.
Anybody in the room? Well, who can we turn to that really knows about this subject?
Margaret has her hand up.
Excellent.
Yeah, I certainly agree that there are essential minerals without which we wouldn't live. And as you said, iron, we need zinc, we need manganese, we need trace minerals. And if we don't get them, we'll be sick. Or we might die. So yeah, there's minerals that we need. We don't have them as gemstones. You don't want kidney stones. You don't want stones in your gallbladder, etc. But yeah, we need minerals in the larger sense.
All things in moderation.
all things. Yeah, calcium. I guess I should mention calcium. We probably need that for our bones.
Right. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Mark, Carolyn has her hand up.
Oh, okay.
At the very back of unanswered questions, Abdu'l-Baha speaks of this in quite extensively. He says, man, like the mineral, is existing, but the existence of the mineral in relation to that of the man is nothingness. For when the body of man is annihilated, it becomes dust and mineral. But when the dust progresses into the human world and its dead body becomes living, man becomes existing. So there's, it depends on where we are in the evolution of the man, I think, how we relate to all of these different categories. I could read more, but it's very interesting.
It is. That's very good. Thank you. I haven't read that for a long time.
That's page 316.
Is that the new one or the old one?
The very, very, very old one.
Okay. Oh, you're reading it in Arabic. That's great.
No, 1908 copyright. Okay. London.
So paragraph 5 in the last section of his commentary on the Surah of Rum contains Abdu'l-Baha's overview of the human soul, within which so much development is possible. Well, that's going to be number 24. So maybe Linda can read that. Linda Russell.
And as for the human soul, it consists of the rational soul. That is to say, an essence within which arises the powers of the human being, the outer and inner senses, the divine perfections and knowledge, the heavenly sciences, the eternal arts, and the hidden wisdom. Likewise, it is the place where dark passions and earthly failings appear.
So the rational soul is an essence within which arises the powers of the human being, and so on. So to my mind, his use of the word essence is not that clear here. If you check the index of some answered questions, you'll find a number of conversations in which Abdu'l-Baha discusses his conception of this key word. With regard to human beings, he identifies their essence as an unchanging station or goal. Using descriptions of the numerous changes undergone by the human embryo, as well as the eons-long transformations of the human body, he asserts that human beings have an essence within the parameters of which and towards which all these modifications are aiming. Human beings did not evolve from the animal kingdom, as I was mentioning earlier. But we may not have achieved our full essence yet. So let's see, number 25. How about Harold?
Man has always been a distinct species. He has been man, not an animal. Consider, if the embryo of man in the womb of the mother passes from one form to another, which in no way resembles the former, is this a proof that the essence of the species has undergone transformation? That it was first an animal and that its organs developed and evolved until it became a man? No, by God, how feeble and unfounded is this thought. For the originality of the human species and the independence of the essence of man are clear and evident.
Okay, Margaret, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering and have about what we do about Neanderthals and Denisovans, as they're Homo sapiens, but they're not Homo sapiens sapiens.
So are they one of the forms that he's referring to in the womb?
Yes, are they? I mean, many Europeans will have some Neanderthal genes in our DNA, but the thought is that the species itself was a separate species and it has, it's extinct. And then there's the Denisovans, I think, are Eastern Asia, a hominid, when they talk about sort of the different human varieties, it's a hominid. Is that man?
Yeah,
Were they
all
men?
hominids be men.
Yeah, were they all men?
Were they all men?
Were they all this distinct species with a rational soul?
Neanderthals are very, very close to humans.
Yeah, they are, that they could crossbreed, yeah.
And Belinda wants to say something.
Yeah, Belinda and then Linda O'Neill, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, some of the recent work on Neanderthals has shown, yes, that they crossbred with us, and we carry, especially those of us with a European background, carry some of the DNA, red hair and blue eyes being among them. The Denisovians, I think, are believed to be very similar, and people in Tibet carry some of their genetic material, apparently, especially something that allows them to live at high altitudes. But I think we need to be very careful about whether we say, oh, this species is human, that species isn't human. Neanderthals were practicing art. And some degree of symbolic or abstract thinking is now evident. And so for that reason alone, I think we have to, at least from our point of view, saying, yeah, let's not take away their humanity. Let's assume that maybe they were human in this essential meaning of human, of having a rational soul, no matter how well or poorly it was expressed at that time. Yeah. I would rather err on the side of inclusive. I would rather be inclusive and have that mistaken than be exclusive and that be the wrong thing. If you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Inclusion.
Mark, I agree. And I don't think we should talk about this topic because it's been co-opted by social Darwinism. In other words, anyway, I think this is a topic we're supposed to transcend. That's my understanding. Humanness is, the rational soul. But if we start setting up pecking orders, it gets close to the social Darwinism discussion, in the late 19th century that has really warped a lot of assumptions, in the 20th century.
Okay, I think that's fair enough. Linda O'Neill, you had a comment?
You have to unmute yourself, Linda. Linda, you're muted. Good.
Yes,
Thanks.
I was just thinking that they're some kind of human species, and they just went extinct, just as animal species can go extinct for whatever reason they did. We don't know. Was this divine intent? We don't know, but they're not around anymore. But if they had, continued to grow and develop, there might have been more than one ongoing human species.
Okay, well, let's not get hung up on that, as Harold is suggesting. I just wanted to mention it in passing, really. So at all times, each of us embodies the human essence specified by God in the book of Genesis. Quote, let us make man in our image after our likeness. Genesis 1:26. The principle of the gradual unfoldment of all created things pertains to the human kingdom, just as it does to the mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdoms. Individually and collectively, human beings grow and develop gradually until they attain the limit of perfection, according to Abdu'l-Baha in Some Answered Questions 51. So the human soul in reading number 24 is a synonym for the human spirit and also for the rational soul. This soul or spirit, through its capacity as the human mind, is designed to search into the realities of all things. Okay, let's see where we're at here. Bonnie, how about you for 26?
As for the mind, it is a power of the human spirit. The spirit is as the lamp, and the mind as the light that shines from it. The spirit is as the tree, and the mind is as the fruit. The mind is the perfection of the spirit, and a necessary attribute thereof, even as the rays of the sun are an essential requirement of the sun itself.
Interesting analogy. However, on its own, the human spirit is only able to comprehend the realities of the physical world. Abdu'l-Baha informs us that it requires the assistance of the spirit of faith in order to extend its inquiries into divine realities. Okay, Jennifer. Let's see, number 27.
The human spirit, which distinguishes man from the animal, is the rational soul. And these two terms, the human spirit and the rational soul, designate one and the same thing. The spirit, which is in the terminology of the philosophers, is called the rational soul, encompasses all things, and as far as human capacity permits, discovers the realities and becomes aware of the properties and effects, the characteristics and conditions of earthly things. But the human spirit, unless it be assisted by the spirit of faith, cannot become acquainted with the divine mysteries and the heavenly realities. It is like a mirror, which, although clear, bright, and polished, is still in need of light. Not until a sunbeam falls upon it can it discover the divine mysteries.
Very important point. So divine grace and revelation play a huge role in our development. So before commencing to articulate the 9 stages open to the human soul, Abdu'l-Baha steps back and comments on the wondrous nature of what he is about to reveal in paragraph 6, which is this number 28. So I guess that's up to Marie to read this one.
Praise be to God for this astonishing sign, this mighty matter, this comprehensive word on the scroll of existence. For thou dost observe that it, the human soul, has various stations, diverse stages of ascent, and manifold degrees to which there is no end. It has the capacity to be the mirror for the manifestation of the realities of the realm of the primal wall, Lahutia, and the place wherein the divine and perfect attributes are revealed and appear. It is also capable of descending into existential darkness, where it is veiled with thick veils arising from its limitations and its specific qualities, which prevent it from attaining to its origin and point of return, and hide from it the signs of its creator, which have been deposited within it through the grace of its maker. Abdu'l-Baha commentary.
Wow. So there's such is Abdu'l-Baha's perspective on what it means to be human. To borrow Ibn Arabi's language, we could say that mankind inhabits a barzakh, an intermediate world poised between the world of God and the sensible world. The existential question facing each of us is, which world will we strive to emulate? Where lies our future evolutionary path? The Baha'i faith, in agreement with all previous religious dispensations, favors an orientation towards the world of God. As we will see, the majority of those who endeavor to tilt the balance of their lives towards God limit themselves to the first 3 stages open to humanity: the commanding, the blaming, and the inspired souls, and are effectively unaware of the existence of the 6 stages beyond. It becomes abundantly clear from this section of his commentary that there is a virtually limitless potential for human growth. Perhaps by the fact of Abdu'l-Baha's having communicated these avenues for future growth, people will become excited over time about the riches available to them through the exploration of these unknown territories. The good news is that there's nothing preventing them from doing so, except for limitations they impose on themselves. It is possible that having the option of seeing things from Abdu'l-Baha's vantage point may encourage them to struggle that much harder against their terrestrial tendencies. Okay, so part C, the 9 levels of the soul. We're finally there. The first 4 stages of the human soul, the commanding, blaming, inspired, and assured or contented, are fairly commonly discussed among Sufis and philosophers. The remaining higher stages are rarely found in Islam, but not completely unknown, according to Momen. As the human soul ascends through the 9 stages available to it, it puts on clothes that are appropriate to the various stages. This is quite similar to the idea we saw as Ibn Arabi explained the process of impulses from the world of God passing through the world of imagination before arriving in the sensible world. There, the impulses take on clothes appropriate to the intended audience. Okay. Is Jack still online, or did his battery die?
Well, Laurie's iPad is online now. I don't know if that's Jack or Laurie. I'll ask them to unmute.
Yeah, let's see who's on there.
Hi, it's Lori. I'm sorry I was late. I had an unexpected appointment.
No, that's fine. So do you have, are you able to see what we have on the screen with the reading?
Absolutely.
Okay. So could you read number 29 for us?
Yes, reading 29. On account of its progression to the stages of nearness and reunion, and its descent into the regions of perdition and error, it, the human soul, is clothed in each stage and station in clothes that are different from the previous. Therefore, it is known in each stage by a particular term. Abdu'l-Baha.
Thank you. So Abdu'l-Baha makes it clear that these 9 stages are permanent acquisitions rather than passing states. This is a distinction that was made in Sufism. Many people commented on this. Stages and states, I say. Stages are much longer enduring. So what's the actual process the soul goes through as it ascends from one stage to another? Paragraph 26 contains his explanation, and that's reading number 30. So let me see here. How about Danielle?
We have stated that this most great sign in one station confirms the soul and its degrees and is transformed from stage to stage and from station to station. For in each degree, it leaves behind its limitations and its condition. It seizes possession through its efforts of the signs of the degree that is above it, and it leaves behind its former condition through tests which purify it, refine it, cleanse it, and make it detached from whatsoever is not worthy of it in the path of its creator. And when it is released and saved from all of the lower degrees and ascends with the help of its originator and fashioner to a high degree, it gains a victory over the power of the lower degrees and vanquishes the hosts of the realities of the base states. Abdu'l-Baha commentary.
So the idea that the soul leaves behind its limitations and its condition in each degree anticipates one of Ken Wilber's principles of development. He calls it transcending and including. As people move to a new level of consciousness, they discard the limitations of their previous stage and embrace the characteristics of their new stage. That's the transcend part of his formula. But they also retain the positive features of their previous stage, which is the reason for the include half of the expression. So we'll explain this in much more detail in the spring. Okay, so here we are, we're ready to look at the first stage of the human soul, which is known as the commanding soul. This level of the soul was introduced in the Quran in verse 1253. Most Muslim commentators believe it is Joseph who is speaking in this passage. Okie dokie, let me see where we're at here. How about you, Joey? A short one, so you can read 31 and 32 when we're ready.
Can I ask a question first?
Sure.
When we're looking at the stages of the soul, are we talking about the capacity also to go back and forth between stages, so up and down? So if you move ahead with your soul, can you also go back or drop down a step?
I think that's entirely possible. It's probably a fairly dynamic process where you're, sneaking up to the next level and then dropping back because it's too big a stretch at that point. And then as you gain experience, then you're ready to spend a little more time at that next level. But still, when you're tired, you come back to the previous one. But generally speaking, you want to evolve further and further and not come back to the previous ones.
But then if we look back to the paradigm that we looked at in the first part of tonight, whereas we grow as human beings and from the pre-operational to the concrete to the formal stage of understanding, that's usually progressive only. You don't sort of.
That's true. I'm not sure if that same approach applies here or not. My sense is it probably doesn't.
Okay.
But let's leave it as an open question.
Okay. So number 31. But I absolve not my own soul. Surely the soul commands to evil, save whom my Lord may show mercy. Truly my Lord is forgiving, merciful.
The soul command. Sorry, go ahead.
Nope. In its descent into the lowest stations of.
Sorry, Joey. Sorry. Whoa, can I stop you?
Yep.
I've got a few things to say in between them.
Okay, I thought you said read too, so.
Yeah, but stay online for that. I'll cue you in a minute. Okay, so the soul commands to evil is where this term comes from, right in this this particular verse of the Quran. This verse plays a foundational role in the Muslim understanding of moral psychology and the structure of the human soul. Based on the Quran, Islamic sources identify 3 levels of the soul. The first is the soul that commands to evil. This is the soul that calls a person to submit to his or her base desires and to those thoughts and actions that lead to forgetfulness of God and go against his command. It is said to be at the mercy of its lusts and desires. So here is Abdu'l-Baha's vivid depiction of the nature of the commanding soul. Now it's ready for Joey to read 32.
In its descent into the lowest stations of animal passions, its preoccupation with the trivialities of this vile world, its infatuation with evil and ephemeral desires, its congealment from the coldness of the contingent world, its extinguishing of the heat of the love of its Lord, the mighty, the generous, its fall and descent into turmoil of error, and its excessive preoccupation with the reprehensible and brutish actions, it is known as the commanding soul, as he hath said, and his word is the truth. Verily, the soul commands to evil, unless my Lord hath mercy on it.
Phew. So you can see that he's adding a great deal of description here to this term that really stands sort of barefaced all by itself in the Quran. You don't really know what to make of it. But Abdu'l-Baha is putting real world examples of this in front of us so that we know exactly what we're talking about and can actually see whether we're stuck in that level ourselves or not. So there's a certain amount of reflection that is encouraged here as he's writing this, I suspect. So there are other Quranic verses which speak of Satan as the one responsible for misguiding people. Let's see here. Sherry, we're back to you again for number 33. And then 33. And then you can stay on board for 34 when I'm ready.
Say, I seek refuge in the Lord of mankind, the King of mankind, the God of mankind, from the evil of the stealthy whisperer, who whispers into the breasts of mankind, from jinn and mankind. From the Study Quran.
Okay. In other cases, Satan is said to be the entity who whispers into the breasts of mankind, prompting them to evil and seducing them. But in verse 1253, it is the passionate soul, or the soul that commands to evil, that is responsible for leading people away from God. There is a famous hadith attributed to Ahmed al-Qurtubi, who died in 1272, that says, truly Satan flows in the blood of the son of Adam. So from one angle, it is Satan who suggests, tempts, prompts, and whispers, in which case the passionate soul then decides to follow the impulses that arise rather than the commands of God. But from a second angle, only the soul that commands to evil has this tendency. Verse 43-36 synthesizes these two perspectives. And okay, back to Sherry for number 34, if you don't mind.
Mark, Carol has her hand up. I'm not sure if this is
okay, yeah.
good
Go
time.
ahead.
It's just, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but when you go into the progression of the soul, like in verse 2, you were talking about like how in verse 2, like you don't remember having chosen the tall glass full because it doesn't basically no longer corresponds to their capacity.
Right.
And so when you look at when Baha'u'llah was waiting and waiting before he declared his mission and the oneness of mankind, it was kind of like his progression too, until he felt comfortable, sure of his station, right? So there's that.
No, I would disagree. I would disagree.
Okay.
I don't think it had anything to do with him realizing his own station. I think it had to do with his assessment of how the people around him were able to accept what he had to reveal.
Okay.
So he was covering his light to a certain degree.
Also, the Bob asked him to allow for his dispensation. 19 years of his dispensation.
Yeah, so he didn't show anything while he was, I mean, they were alive at the same time, but he didn't show any of his light to the world at large in preference for the Bob. Anything further there on that, Carol?
Well, only that it just, it just becomes so realistic that the soul is so emancipated and it progresses, even in this coil, the realm of this coil, you know, like it's just so important to realize that you have to be reliant on God's will.
You know, there's a dance that goes on between you and God, I think. I mean, you can want it all you want, but until you're actually ready, the grace of God isn't going to zap you, I don't think.
You know,
Mark Durham has his hand up.
Oh, please.
Sorry.
There's a proverb Allah brings in his writing. He says, not everything that's known can be mentioned. And not everything that can be mentioned, its audience is available or are ready.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that the people are ready, it has time to be said. So you see the 3 stages until the declaration comes. All these stages pass through until make sure that the time is ready to.
Yeah. It's actually a very delicate thing. And I think one reading I came across once suggested that the whole of history had to evolve to a particular point before the Bab would reveal himself on that particular night to Mullah Hussein. If it had been ready a day before, he would have revealed a day before. It's extremely precise. Bill, I see your hand up there.
Yeah, this is more in response to something someone else said earlier in terms of whether this is reversible, essentially, the growth of the soul, the growth of the spirit.
Yeah.
And it just occurred to me that there's more than one dimension to this. There's the growth of the soul, and there's a state of the soul at any given time. And that probably the growth of the soul is hard to take away growth. It's hard for that to be, I think, diminished or made smaller. But I think as a result of the growth of the soul, to go to the next level, you have to go through so many different states that result from what's coming at you, both environmentally as well as the inherent dark side that we were talking about earlier. All those things are always there. They have to be cycled through at these higher levels. So you grow, but as you grow, the challenges to that further growth increase. So the state that your soul might be in may be more of a challenged state and less of a calm seeing state, even though much growth has occurred.
Does anybody else want to react to that?
No, Mark, a concern I have is to, we're talking about developmental spiritual psychology in a way, but this does not apply to the manifestation of God.
No.
At least I don't think so.
No.
But it's tempting to do that, like, to think of, Baha'u'llah as evolving. I think it's more like he's a teacher and he's obedient to the Bab who came before him, and he's obedient to God, but he's not developing in a moral spiritual sense.
No.
Right? That's a different station entirely.
Exactly.
Yeah, anyway, this issue comes up a lot, in dialogue with, New Age spiritual advocates. They want to democratize Jesus and Muhammad, and if they learn of Baha'u'llah, they want to democratize him too. Anyway, that's a challenge because he's from a different station, a different level of reality. And so not everything that we, learn about humanness applies to him. Anyway, but he did occupy the human temple. So it's a mystery.
Yeah.
But I don't think we should try to use developmental psychology to understand how Baha'u'llah developed, across the lifespan.
I agree with you 100% on that.
Mark, Linda has her hand up as well.
Okay, please go ahead.
Could you unmute yourself, Linda?
So with regard to the stations of the soul, I'm wondering at which point do we no longer have a higher and lower nature? Or is the lower nature always there lurking despite what level of soul we've evolved to?
Stay tuned. Next class.
Oh, really?
Is there an answer to that?
Well, I've never actually framed it that way, but I think it's probably embedded in one of those stages that you get to the point where you just dispense with the lower altogether. But I'm not going to tell you what it is yet.
Okay.
Mark Allen has his hand up.
Okay.
It's often the case where we develop this concept of levels and we somehow reify them. We make them sound like they're real. And probably the truth is that it's a far more broken up pathway. You may be talking about going from level 1 to level 2, but it's not, I don't think it's like we are going through one particular level. I think it's maybe 100 different small experiences or 1,000 that we need to go through in order to actually change ourselves into something that's a bit different. So we can talk about these levels and it seems like they become almost like branches of a tree where you can actually see them and sort of climb up this tree. But the reality is when the tree is actually producing these branches, it's doing an awful lot more work. And there's 100 different little levels and stages and opportunities that are taken or not taken and roots. So I think we have to be very careful with the idea of thinking that it's a jump. I think it's a whole process and it's very organic. And it takes, sometimes it can take more than a lifetime to move from one level to another, and thousands of experiences.
That's an excellent point, Alan. I think you're quite right. It is a tendency in language to, as you say, reify things and make them seem like they're distinct, but really it's a spectrum that we're moving across. And it's very dynamic. And it consists of, as you say, thousands of experiences. And we're very slow to give up the things that are already in place in our makeup. Right? We don't rush out there and give it all up in order to be able to move to the next stage. So although there's an urge to transcend, there's also that very powerful urge to include, to stay put, right? The conservative element of our character. And I think that's even more true the closer you are to the low end of the spectrum, because of the nature of Nasut. Whereas as you move into Malakut in some of the higher levels of consciousness, things are much more fluid. You're much more able to move on to new things. Well, I'm going to impose my will here and say, hopefully you're willing to stay another 5 minutes beyond our regular time. I'd really like to finish what I've got set aside for tonight, if you don't mind. So I guess, was it Sherry that was reading the last? Yeah, and so we were going to read number 34, and the idea is we're still talking about the Satans at this point. This is just another verse in the Quran that makes a statement about them. So go ahead, Sherry.
Whosoever turns blindly away from the remembrance of the compassionate, we assign to him a Satan who is then a companion unto him.
And just go ahead with 35 as well.
We have indeed made the Satans the friends of those who do not believe.
That's very interesting. We just attach a Satan to somebody who doesn't believe. I'll let them have their way with them. Oh, it's a scary idea. Okay, so I want to move on to the second level. So instead of the soul that commands to evil, we're at the blaming soul. So eventually the soul will rise above its full-time commitment to physical reality into the station of what the Quran called the blaming soul. Here again, this is a stage that was introduced by the Quran. So that's number 36. Let me see where we are. Ding, 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 ding. Carolyn, how about number 36 for us? And I'll ask you to do 37 later as well.
I swear by the day of resurrection, and I swear by the blaming soul. Does man suppose that we shall not gather his bones? Nay, but we are able to fashion even his fingers and toes.
So we don't want to get distracted by the content of that verse, but just to show you that that phrase, the blaming soul, does appear in the Quran. The blaming soul reproaches a person for his or her evil states and forgetfulness of God, and actively attempts to effect change within that person for the better. The blaming soul recognizes the shortcomings of its own commanding soul and chastises it in order to begin the process of transforming it into the soul at peace, which will eventually return to its Lord content. Every soul is believed to be capable of recognizing its shortcomings, as expressed in this hadith. There is no pious or profligate soul, but that it blames itself on the day of resurrection. If it has done good, it says, how did I not do more? And if it had done evil, it says, would that I had desisted. So the day of resurrection here, I think, is referring to your own personal day of resurrection when you're facing God with the lifetime of experiences that you have to share. Okay, so Carolyn, 37, please.
Indeed, man shall be a testimony against himself, though he prefers his excuses.
Okay, and Heather, maybe you could do 38 and 39 for us.
Against you. Whoops, that won't work. The 39, the day when the excuses of the wrongdoers will not benefit them, and theirs will be the curse, and theirs will be the evil abode.
Did you read 38 as well?
Yeah, read your, I think I was muted.
Oh.
Read your book. On this day, your soul suffices as a reckoner against you.
So it's a Trojan horse. It keeps track of all the things you've done and blabs about it when you die. Terrific. What a world. Okay, thank you. So in Surah 75, verse 2, then, God swears by the reverent, God-fearing soul that blames itself for falling short, although it strives for obedience. The blaming soul in the day of resurrection can thus be seen as intimately connected, not only by the role, I guess it was, sorry, I didn't tell you that this previous hadith about how did I not do more, or would that I had desisted, came from a person by the name of Ajiba. Anyway, I see I didn't reference this very well. The blaming soul in the day of resurrection can thus be seen as intimately connected, not only by the role Ajiba's hadith ascribes to the blaming soul on the day of resurrection, but also because both expose one's faults. Just as one is called to account for all of one's lapses and shortcomings on the day of resurrection, so too does the blaming soul call one to account for them throughout the life of this world. So if you do a thorough job of bringing yourself to account each day and modify your behavior, your difficulties going through the day of resurrection are going to be greatly lessened. So let's end tonight's class with Abdu'l-Baha's more substantial portrayal of the second stage of the soul. Now let's see who would like to read this one. Well, Lori, would you feel up to doing this number 40? It's a bit long, but it's great.
Certainly, yes. Then it progresses from this dire state and this base level to a station wherein there comes to it from time to time an awareness of the depths of its embroilment and danger, of its descent into the abyss of heedlessness, its treading such pathways, its self-concealment from its Lord God, its neglect of its Creator, its bewilderment in the wilderness of error and passion, and its forgetfulness of the mention of God the King, the Mighty, the All-High. On occasion, there passes over it the breeze of the perception of its state, and it is awoken to a slight extent. It then blames itself for the depths that it perceives of its immersion in the tribulation of heedlessness and transgression, and reproaches itself when it sees itself bewildered in the deserts of perversity and error. It regrets its baseness and its vile state in the lowest degree of error and ruinous passions, and its concealment behind the accumulated veils which prevent it from ascending to lofty spiritual stations and distract it from the remembrance of God through the evil whisperings of Satan. And so, on account of its regret and remorse concerning its station and its blaming itself, is called the blaming soul. As he hath said, may his name be magnified. No, I will swear by the blaming soul.
Beautiful. So once again, you see that Abdu'l-Baha is painting a masterpiece compared to the very short descriptions that were available to people in the Islamic dispensation. You could spend a great deal of time analyzing all the different components that he put into this one level of the soul, and analyzing your own life and seeing to what extent this is true of you. What do you have to work on in order to be able to ascend, as he says here, to lofty spiritual stations?
Mark, Linda had her hand up.
Okay, Linda, go ahead.
I was just thinking as you read this really describes, the station of the soul as being completely inadequate and unworthy and sinful, that's described in the latter part of the long obligatory prayer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the key element here is awareness. In other words, no problem can be solved unless you're aware of a problem. It's like this is describing awareness of sinfulness, you might say, or that we're concealed from God. We're concealing ourselves from God. So self-reproachment is a higher state than non-self-reproachment and remaining in sin. The word awakened is here. You're awoken to a slight extent. Abdu'l-Baha says. I think that this is why Alcoholics Anonymous works. It bases it on you have a problem. You're very aware of the problem, and not until you're very aware of the problem can you begin to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I like the detail. I hear what you're saying, Mark. It's way more than these little tantalizing phrases that you find here and there in the Quran.
That's right.
It's very well developed.
Yeah. Okay, folks, I'm realizing that we're over time. Thank you for putting up with me that extra little bit. But we have now finished the section that I was hoping to get through. And we've only really covered 2 of the levels of the human soul. But they're ones that we could probably say we had more experience with than some of the ones that are to come. So we'll have a little less to say about some of those. But even so, Abdu'l-Baha tells us a great deal about these higher levels of consciousness that are available to us once we get rid of some of these problems that they have at these 2 lower levels.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
But I don't need an answer, just for us to think about it.
Okay.
You see this chapter of Rome, you know, you'd say it's a story about the war, Byzantine, Persian, and so on. How come Abdu'l-Baha moved to the subject of souls?
Yeah.
In defining this or in explaining this? I keep on asking. I read the whole chapter in Arabic to try to understand how Abdu'l-Baha turned with his high level of expressions, amazing words, you know, to explain the room in this way. Like, of course, I will never understand it if I didn't see the commentary and just read the chapter in Arabic or English. I will never think of what Abdu'l-Baha is talking about. How he connected this with, only God knows. Thank you.
But I think it comes down to that first symbolic meaning that we took a look at the beginning, where he's talking about that war between the believers and the unbelievers.
Right.
And so I think these levels that we're talking about really are wrestling with the degree that we're going to believe. And so it's possible to believe even more than we do now at a deeper level or a higher level. So we're being challenged here to consider how we choose to live our lives as a Baha'i. You know, to what degree do you want to have a love affair with God? I don't know if that helps. Carolyn, you've got...
Mark, Carol has also had her hand up for a few minutes.
Oh, okay, we'll start with Carolyn and come back to Carolyn. Carol, you're on?
I'll let Carolyn go first.
Okay, Carolyn. You're still muted though.
Muted, Carolyn.
There you go.
Okay, at the end of this wonderful chapter on the real pre-existence that Abdu'l-Baha has written us, it says, thus it is evident and clear that although beings exist in relation to God and to the word of God, they are non-existent. This is the beginning and the end of the word of God, who says, I am the Alpha and Omega, for he is the beginning and the end of bounty. And then I think the most important thing is that when the names and attributes of God require the existence of beings, like the sun requires its rays, the eternal bounty does not cease. But if it were to, this would be contrary to the perfections of God. So it's like it's a reflection on God's intentions to love us. In my interpretation, maybe you can have another one. If this didn't exist, if this bounty of God didn't exist, despite our imperfections, I would say. We could go on about the Alpha and Omega bit quite a long time, I think, but there are many.
I'm wondering, Carolyn, if that isn't a reference to the, we were talking about how many layers are there in the Baha'i cake.
Mhm.
And in that particular case, there's really only God, you know, in terms of reality. Everything other than God
Right.
is not worthy of consideration.
Mhm. But
But
problem is we count on his bounty. And
well,
that's what
absolutely.
it's talking about. Mhm.
Yeah. And so that's why we're looking at the 5-layer version in our chart, because there's more room for us in those worlds of God than there is in that single world where there's nothing but God.
Yes, exactly.
So we've got room to breathe, at least, in those 5 worlds.
Yes.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of tired. This is exhausting. Focusing on this kind of material for very long is a little bit overwhelming. But anyway, thank you so much for continuing to come to these classes night after night after night. This is really awe-inspiring. And we'll do it again, but we're going to wait 2 weeks for the next one. And the Zoom number will be different. We'll send out a new one because we had anticipated only a certain number to the end of December. So we've got to change to a new number.
Mark, Carol had a comment. Is your comment brief, Carol?
Very, very brief. Like when you kind of go back to your readings number 32, 33, it's again like a way, like when you bring about service to kind of stave away the jinn that can be a bad whisperer to your ear. So service is a way of worship. So that was my comment.
That's a good point. Yes, it is.
It is.
Anybody else?
This is the way of worship. Soul's work.
Okay.
This
Well, have yourself a wonderful Christmas and New Year's, and enjoy the rain on Christmas Eve.
How weird is that?
Well, I won't thank you for that, but I thank you for the class.
Yes, it's wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Nice to see everybody.
Night.
Take care.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take
Thanks a
care.
lot.
Good night, Wayne.
Oh, we didn't see Wayne tonight.
Yeah, he was here. Yeah.
I guess so.
He was incognito tonight.
Yeah.
Good night, Mary. Good night, Marie.
Goodbye, Linda.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. See you then.
Good night, Wayne. I hope you're feeling better.
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, I'm going to go.
Okay, you're going to go and I'll end the meeting and we'll let it record.
Great.
Or I'll stop recording, right?